claim that Claudius's eldest daughter was such a pivotal figure in Britain's history before Tacitus et al. Necessitates further consideration. Suetonius's information on Antonia is remarkably inadequate when read in isolation. However, when examined alongside the contemporary epigraphic and numismatic evidence, it reveals a far more compelling account than the fraudulent and fanciful tales of Tacitus and Dio. This chapter will present a clear picture of who Antonia was and how she was perceived by Rome. Moreover, it supports the Brittonic source's exclusive marriage alliance claim, its implications, and the work's wider validity. Antonia and her mother remained recognized members of Claudius's family after her parents divorced circa AD 31. Prior to her father's marriage to Messalina in AD 39, Antonia was Claudius's first and only child. By the time the emperor had completed the Aqua Virgo, AD 51–52, he had 3 living children: his firstborn, Antonia, and his 2 children, with Messalina, Octavia, and Britannicus. Each had their names inscribed upon the aqueduct's completed arches. His niece Agrippina, daughter of his dead brother Germanicus, also features alongside his children. In AD 52, these 4 individuals represented Claudius's only living blood relatives. Every other family member had died prior to the completion of this section of the Aqua Virgo and the honorary inscriptions which adorned it. Claudius's mother and father had died in AD 9 and 38 respectively. His brother and sister had died in AD 19 and 31 respectively, and all but one of his nieces and nephews had died by AD 41. Claudius married his only surviving niece, Agrippina, the daughter of his dead brother Germanicus, and subsequently adopted her son, Nero. The names of all 3 appear beneath the emperor's 4 immediate and living blood relatives on the arch's columns. Their contrary condition, dead, old, and young, and their subordinate setting beneath Claudius' children, confirms that they were not Claudius' expected successors in AD 52. His offspring, on the other hand, were literarily and symbolically above all subsequent claimants. Moreover, they were all unmistakably alive at the time, and predictably the most likely to succeed Claudius. However, over the next 2 years, Agrippina successfully elevated her own position, and her sons, into predominance. Suetonius remarks on this astonishing development. Just before his adoption of Nero, as if it were not bad enough to adopt a stepson when he had a grown-up son of his own, he, Claudius, publicly declared that no one had ever been taken into the Claudian family by adoption. Britannicus was approximately 10 years old, and Nero 12, when Claudius married Agrippina. It is not known whether Nero was adopted immediately, but the Aqua Virgo inscription certainly suggests that he was still playing second fiddle to Claudius's natural children in AD 52. However, and within 2 years, Claudius and his son had suspiciously succumbed to poison, and the cuckoo had successfully secured the succession. The teenage Nero initially entrusted his imperial affairs to his mother Agrippina, but ultimately took back control and killed her in AD 59. Regardless, the inscription clearly identifies the predominance of Claudius's living relatives in AD 52. The names of Nero, his dead grandfather, and malevolent mother appear as an addition to the original inscription. The supplementary nature of the lower line is indicated by Agrippina's name appearing twice. Firstly, on the higher inscription, alongside Claudius' living children, and again on the lower. It is remarkable, abnormal, and unique for an individual and their heritage to be named twice on any inscription. It is even more incredible to see this peculiarity on such a significant structure. In fact, it confirms that the names on the lower inscription were added subsequently. The details of the inscription, clearly indicated by Ligorio's drawing, demonstrates that the lower inscription was added in AD 59. He records Cos 3 beneath Nero's name, which proves that the addition post-dates AD 58, the year Nero was consul for a 3rd time. Moreover, Nero was consul again in AD 60 and 68. This leaves only a narrow time frame for the Cos 3 epigraph to apply, namely during the intervening year, AD 59. His mother and grandfather, whose names appear alongside his own, were therefore both dead by the time the lower inscription was added. The purpose of their posthumous appearance upon the arch was to profess Nero's legitimacy. Their conspicuous presence, alongside Nero and Claudius's children, reiterated the adopted emperor's roundabout relationship to his predecessor's bloodline. It may also have served to whitewash his involvement in the deaths of Claudius, Britannicus, and his own mother. Regardless, Within 6 years, Nero had single-handedly annihilated every living soul named on the original inscription. It has been suggested that the Antonia represented on the arch's columns, alongside Claudius' other children, is the emperor's mother. This is loose conjecture, and supported neither by evidence, beyond Tacitus, nor rational reason. Indeed, what possible purpose could cause Claudius to prefer his dead mother to his living firstborn child on this structure and at this juncture? Foremost, Claudius's mother had died, aged 72, 15 years before the building and inscription were completed. Furthermore, her perished state was distinctly different from the three other named individuals on the original inscription. They were characteristically young, alive, and the children of Claudius and his dead brother. The awkward assumption that this Antonia is Claudius's mother and not his daughter is further undermined by the fact that the former voiced unreserved contempt for her son during her own lifetime. She is reported as having often called him a monster of a man, not finished, but merely begun by Dame Nature. And if she accused anyone of dullness, she used to say that he was a bigger fool than her son Claudius. The traditional supposition that this inscription refers to Claudius' mother is based on the cognomen Augusta. Suetonius inadvertently provided the catalyst for this claim. In Caligula, he reports that the newly appointed emperor wanted to honor his parents with annual funeral sacrifices, games in the circus, and a carriage to carry his mother's image in the procession. And by decree of the Senate, he reportedly heaped upon his grandmother Antonia whatever honors Livia Augusta had ever enjoyed. This appears perfectly plausible and acceptable. However, his report on Claudius' inauguration is remarkably similar. It reads, he had divine honors voted his grandmother Livia and public funeral sacrifices to honor his parents in annual games in the circus, and for his mother a carriage to bear her image through the circus and the name Augusta, which she had declined in her lifetime. Both accounts clearly mirror one another, but are conspicuously unlike any other imperial inauguration reported by Suetonius. This is not particularly alarming. Claudius may have enjoyed Caligula's ceremony so much that he chose to replicate it when he came to power only 4 years later. However, it is curious that Claudius should give his grandmother Livia the divine honors of Augusta. According to Caligula, she had already been recognized as Livia Augusta when the young emperor gave his grandmother Antonia whatever honors Livia Augusta enjoyed. This confusion provides for only limited eventualities, none of which assist the traditional assumptions. The original records may well have been removed, altered, or destroyed in the century or so which separated Suetonius from the original contemporary chroniclers. The record's absence would inevitably have affected Suetonius's subsequent reports and invited a degree of conjecture on his behalf to fill the void. Indeed, the biographer's work may also have suffered similarly in the centuries since his work was originally penned. Nevertheless, and if his reports are to be taken at face value, Claudius's taking of the cognomen Augusta for the leading ladies of his family is an understandable and expected expression of his family's legacy and legitimacy. Therefore, it follows that he would bestow the same cognomen upon the eldest living female in the Claudian bloodline, his firstborn, Antonia. Claudius's decision to honor his eldest daughter with the same moniker as his mother and grandmother can be understood by the circumstantial changes both he and she experienced in the decade before his reign. Around AD 31 to 32, Claudius amicably divorced Antonia's mother, Aelia Paetina. The split was not due to his lack of love for Aelia or Antonia, but purely for his own political preservation. His wife's adoptive brother, Sejanus, had concurrently fallen from favor and was executed by Tiberius in AD 32. Claudius chose not to remarry for several years, and Antonia remained his first and only child for the best part of a decade. Claudius's subsequent marriage to Messalina inevitably affected Antonia's previously predominant position in the hierarchy of inheritance. However, Claudius continued to recognize his firstborn, who regularly appeared on coins alongside his other children, Octavia and Britannicus. In AD 52, when Claudius's 3 children appeared alongside one another on the arches of the Aqua Virgo, their names were accompanied by Claudius's only other living relative, his niece and now wife, Agrippina. However, within 2 years of the inscription, both Claudius and Britannicus had succumbed to poison, and Octavia found herself married to the new emperor, Nero. Agrippina remains the chief suspect in Claudius's demise, a suspicion which is not allayed by his heir apparent, Britannicus, suffering the same fate shortly after. Nor is Agrippina exonerated by her keeping Claudius's death a secret until everything was settled relative to his successor. She allegedly ensured that prayers were said for his recovery, and comedians called to amuse him as it was pretended by his own desire. Only Claudius's eldest child, Antonia, appears to have avoided Agrippina's attention, a conspicuous oversight, considering her methodical and murderous machinations. Thus far, Agrippina had successfully married her own uncle, convinced him to adopt her only son, and successfully arranged for their children to marry. She killed or corralled all who stood between her son and the throne. Considering her meticulous method, it is unlikely that Agrippina would ignore the one remaining liability, Claudius's last blood relative, Antonia. The only fair presumption is that the latter was inaccessible to the former, in Britain. Antonia's inescapable importance to the Claudian bloodline, especially after the successful dispatch of Claudius and Britannicus, must have racked Agrippina. By the time she died, Nero had still not produced an heir with Octavia, and was increasingly unlikely to do so. Agrippina's failure to capture or kill Antonia, as she had successfully done with all of Claudius's immediate family, meant her cynical ambition amounted to naught at her end. The inescapable silence surrounding Antonia, before she was remarkably recalled to life and only to be murdered, speaks volumes. Her pedigree and position represented far too much to the Claudian dynasty and its namesake's expedition to Britain, to vanish from the vellum of history. Censorship and sanitization of the records over the intervening century, which separated Suetonius from the affairs he wished to report upon, may explain the dearth of documentation on this indisputably important woman.